Hey everybody, it's Nicole again. I am late doing another video. I know that I've been away for a while. I've been super busy doing everything from my normal day job to setting up an Etsy shop and trying to put some stuff up on it. I wanted to do a video for you guys today about one of my other passions. If you guys follow my my other videos, you know I do a lot of planner videos, and I love planners and the planner community. One of my other obsessions, though, is sort of planner related, but not planner related. It's stationery related, and it's to do with pens. So I wanted to put together kind of a beginner's guide on the basics of pens. I don't know if anyone else is obsessed with pens as I am, but I find, I like my paper to be good quality, my planner to be good quality, and the thing I use to write in it to also be good quality. So I'm just going to go over the different types of pens, the kinds of pens that I like to use, the different features of them, and sort of give you all a kind of a beginner's guide to pens, what kind of pens you might like or like to choose, just some general information. So in front of me here, I have a selection of pens that I'm going to go over, and you could actually break this down into three different types of pens. So basically what it is the pens differ based on the kind of ink they use and the mechanism they use to write. So I'll start off with this guy actually. This is a what's called a ballpoint pen. Most people know ballpoint pens. They know that they're a fairly common pen. And some of you might actually think, hey, there's got to be more than three types, right? If there's a ballpoint pen, isn't there a rollerball pen as well? There is a rollerball pen. They're actually the same kind of mechanism within the pen. The difference between them, though, is the kind of inks they use. So I'll go over the fundamentals of ballpoint and rollerball pens first. They are, like I said, the same mechanism is used to write with both kinds of pens. Essentially what it is in the end of the pen, there's a small metal ball at the very end of the pen that rotates around from the outside to the inside where the ink is stored, picks up the ink, and then as you write, it applies the ink to the paper. And again, the same mechanism is used in a rollerball pen, a metal ball at the end, and as it rotates, it picks up ink and applies it to the paper. The difference between these two types of pens is, again, the ink that's within them. In ballpoint pens, the ink tends to be more oil-based, so the benefits of that is that it is not as susceptible to water, and it's not as susceptible to smearing. Some of the downsides to it, though, is you get what's called skipping, which I'll do some writing samples with each one of these pens so that you can see kind of how they write. Okay, so I'll just write. Oops. Okay, so pardon my horrible handwriting, but you can basically see, if you look real close, like you see there on the O, that's what's called skipping. You can see there's a bold line at the top, there's a bit of a inconsistent line there, and then it picks up again. That's called skipping. You can see some more towards the end of the organized. It's just part of the properties of oil-based inks. They're more viscous, they're thicker inks, so they actually don't tend to write as consistently as other types of inks. It's kind of one of the things that brought about rollerballs, where rollerballs actually use more water-based or gel-based inks. So they tend to be smoother, a lot less viscous. They tend to skip a little less. That's not to say that they don't skip, because they do, but you'll find that it happens a little less frequently with a gel pen than it does with a ballpoint pen. Personally, I'm not a big fan of ballpoint pens. They have their place in life, I suppose, but they're not my favorite pen to write with. I keep one in my handbag at all times, though, for things like carbon paper, where you have to use a lot of pressure, push in to get the paper to, or get the impression to go through the several different layers of the carbon paper. But as I say, they're not my favorite because they do tend to skip a lot. I'm not a huge fan of them, but I do keep one around just in case I ever need to use one. So that's the Ballpoint. Again, rollerballs are very, very similar. They just have a different style of ink in them, and I'll show you how well they write versus a Ballpoint. Okay, so you can see there's basically no skipping. Oh, focus! Come on, come on. Play nice, please. Jerk. Anyway, oh, there you go. So yeah, you can see there's basically no skipping. There's no, if I rub my finger along it, they tend to dry rather quickly. They don't, if you're a person who kind of writes like this, and you rub your hand along it, it's not going to smear. So that's the benefits of these two types of pens. They're really good for that. The other benefit too, for those of you who use different types of paper, is that you know that there's this thing called bleed through. So bleed through is basically where you can see what you've written on the front part of the page through the back of it. You can see the more liquid the ink is, the more it tends to be able to bleed through the paper, so paper absorbs the ink and can actually display it on the back side. So you can see the gel ink pen that I used can be seen a little bit more through this paper than the Ballpoint pen, and that's simply because of the ink that's in it. But again, it's a pick and choose. Which one do you prefer? Are you going to be bothered by the bleed through? There's also always other alternatives like getting better quality paper, but for me, I prefer to not have the skipping and to have just that little bit of bleed through versus using a Ballpoint pen that constantly skips. So that's that kind of pen. Oops. Next kind of pen I'm going to show you is a felt tip. Most people are familiar with Sharpie. Felt tip pens have a porous felt tip at the end that draws ink again from the barrel, and then as you put pressure on the tip, it applies the ink. These inks again are very liquid. I think most people know that felt tips are probably the most infamous for bleed through, so I'll go ahead and do an ink test for you. And that's again because they are they tend to be quite liquidy. They also tend to apply a lot more ink to the paper, so you can see how much more bold that is. And again, very obvious that it bleeds through. It's just a quality of felt tip pens in general, I think. But Sharpie is a little more infamous for bleed through than most others. And I see if I can find another felt tip. Just use this one. So this is a Staedtler. Let's see how it compares. Okay. So that one's not nearly as bad. So, it's not a feature of all felt tip pens that they just bleed straight through 40 layers of paper. They are or can be quite good. I know like Papermate Flares, I think they are, and what's the other one? I actually have a bunch somewhere around here, and I always forget their name. These ones. What's their name? Oh yeah, the La Pens. Sorry, La Pens. These are also felt tip, so these are quite fine nibbed. And for those who don't know what that means, it's literally the end of the pen. In fountain pen lingo is called the nib. So that's just me letting my fountain pen lingo bleed into the wrong style of pen. Whatever. So there's Crazy Organized again in another type of felt tip, the Le Pen style. And if you flip it over, look, there's hardly any bleed through, which is awesome. So yeah, it just depends on the kind of pen. I guess that's true for any pen, really. So those are felt tips. And then the next style, which happens to be my favorite style for a lot of different reasons, is the good old-fashioned fountain pen. So this is one of my more recent fountain pens. It's from TWSBI. It's a 580 diamond all, which stands for aluminum because the little parts you see there in purple are actually fashioned out of machined aluminum. And I've also got this other one here, which I use for work because it's a little more classy, is the Diamond 580 in rose gold. So it's a really nice pen as well. They're both the same, but they have two different nib widths. So the basics of a fountain pen, the mechanism for them, as you can kind of see already, you can see in the barrel, sort of the same with any pen really, is the ink chamber. So the ink's contained within the barrel. How a fountain pen works is that it flows through from the barrel down to the nib, which is this guy here is called the nib. And I don't know if you can see it too well. Unfortunately, my camera's, you can kind of see it. You can sort of see a split down the middle of the nib. And those two pieces are called the tines, so one here and one here. And as you put pressure down on the pen, the tines kind of split just a little bit, and the ink flows through that channel and applies the ink to the paper. Now, the reason I really love fountain pens is, one, they write very, very smoothly. So I'll go ahead and... with no skipping. So you can see there's no skipping on this kind of a pen. The second reason I love them is because I can actually choose the ink color. I can even mix my own. I've got about 6 or 7 bottles of various ink colors. I just refill them and reuse them constantly rather than, buying a new pen every couple of weeks. I just refill the ink. It actually works out to be quite a bit cheaper. I love them because you can customize the nibs. If you find that a nib is, say a little bit scratchy, or you want something that's a little bit wider. For example, this one is called a fine nib, so it writes fairly finely, sort of comparable to these first two at the top. Or you want something to write a little bit more bold. This one is a medium nib. You can actually replace the nibs and get yourself a broader or smaller nib as you need. And so there you go. So you can see that's a little bit more bold. That's the medium nib there. And, they're just a lot of fun to work with, and for people who have like a favorite kind of pen, or tend to like to have one kind of pen, don't necessarily want to bring around all kinds of pens, or even if you do like having multiple colors of pens, there's a lot of pen manufacturers out there at places like Jet Pens or Goulet Pens that have starter pens that run fairly cheaply, and you can actually buy a set and fill every single one of them up with every color of the rainbow if you wanted, and you can bring those around with you. I actually do tend to bring a couple of pens with me. This one writes in black ink, this one writes in purple ink, and I have a smaller one that actually writes in pink. And I just, when I get bored of an ink, I can actually empty this out by twisting this little dial at the end here, and the ink comes out of the nib back into the ink bottle, and I can refill it with another type that I want to use for the next week. So, you can get a lot of freedom and a lot of choice using fountain pens. Plus, if you go to the higher end fountain pens, they are a lot more ergonomic. You can get all kinds of body styles, body shapes, different weights, different materials. These ones I particularly love because they're what are called demonstrator pens. So you can actually see the ink there sloshing around inside of the body, which I think is really cool. I love that. It's got a faceted body, so you can see it kind of sparkling there. But yeah, I really love fountain pens. I've got quite a few now. I've got, I think, 3 Lame fountain pens These are my two TWSBI 580 diamonds, and then I've also got a TWSBI mini somewhere around here. And like I said, they're just great. You really do fall in love with them. They feel like a better quality pen. I really find them to be a joy to write with. So if anybody's interested in actually trying out fountain pens, I do recommend pens like the Lame fountain pens, which I think I actually have one here. So this is a Lame, and they're simple to use, very quick to set up. Most of the time what they come with is cartridges like this one here, where you just pop it in the pen. So it's got a little chamber up there that pierces the top of the cartridge, and you just fit that in there, screw on the bottom part of the pen, and then you just right away. So, like I said, they come in different nib sizes. You can get, it's extra fine, fine, medium, broad, and then you can get what's called italic nibs, which is, I don't know necessarily if Lame makes them in these kinds of pens, but they are pens that give you more of a calligraphy look. So, broader strokes depending on the direction of the pen, and narrower strokes in the alternate direction. So, I definitely recommend these. They're, very simple to use, very quick to set up, a good starter pen for anybody who's interested in them. I'll also post links in the comment section below for the places that I shop for pens. So I live in Australia. It's a little bit more difficult for us to source. So we always source, or I do anyway, source online. So I'll give you the link to my two favorite shops. The two shops that I got these from, actually, I think they were both the same shop. Actually, no, I think I got this one from TWSBI Direct, and this one I got from Goulet Pens. So I'll post those links below. But, this is just, like I said, a quick video on the different types of pens. For those who didn't know the differences between pen types, what kind of choice there actually is out there. There's high-end pens, like high-end fountain pens, just as much as there are high-end ballpoint pens. So again, if you are a fan of ballpoint and rollerball pens, there are companies like Lame who do higher end versions of these. So it's not to say that the characteristics of the pens that I showed you today are going to be universal. Everyone makes that same or has those same problems. I've never tried higher end ballpoints, higher end rollerballs, but I suspect these are people who have made a business out of pens, and they've done a lot of research and development into making their pens top of the line and making them user friendly and trying to eliminate those problems that we find in the typical pens we purchase from places like Officeworks. So, if you're a fan of those types of pens, I definitely say, look into companies like Lame for higher end versions if you're interested in maybe just upgrading the kinds of pens that you use. Otherwise, there's a lot of really nice pens out there that write really well. This one in particular is one of my favorites. It's an Energel. There you go. It's an Energel by Pentel, and it's actually one of my absolute favorites. It writes super smooth. It writes with vivid, bright inks. It's not really susceptible to water. It's not... it won't smear on your hand. It's just a really good pen. So I definitely recommend these. And they're just, I wouldn't say cheapy throwaways, but they're certainly cheaper than, one of these for sure. But, I think they're really good pens. So, you don't have to spend a mint. This was more a video to show you, like I said, the different styles of pens and what their characteristics are, and hopefully help you when, making decisions about what things to buy, what kind of pens you'd like to use, or even getting into the use of things like fountain pens. So I hope this helped you guys. I hope you guys liked the video. I hope you like and subscribe below, and I'll see you next time. Thank you so much. Bye.